All right, our next intentional tort is slander. And really, we have both slander and libel, which fall under the category of defamation. So we have two different things you can do that both are considered defamation. And the first one is slander. And slander is anything that is spoken. So when someone says something untruthful and hurtful about another person, that is slander. And I like to think of slander and spoken. They both start with S's, so that's how you can kind of remember that slander is the spoken one. Slander is a situation where we don't allow people to get damages for things like humiliation and so forth. You're going to have to show that you have actually had some sort of financial loss in order to be able to sue for slander. Unless we have slander per se, that is our one exception, and that is if they said something really horrible about you. It would have to be that you've maybe have a loathsome communicable disease, or you've committed some sort of serious crime, or if you are professionally incompetent. If they've said one of those three things, then you can sue for damages just for humiliation. But otherwise, we are looking for specific monetary loss. Now, our next slide would be an example of libel. And libel we usually think of it as written, but it's really any time something is put into a permanent form. So it could be something that is recorded, is on TV, or recorded on the radio, as well as something that's printed. And the idea here is that it's something that we can never totally destroy. It's somehow out there. And so we allow a little bit more in damages in a situation that involves libel. Here you can get damages for humiliation, something like that. Now in this situation, and this is just a picture of one of those rags that you might see at the newspaper or at the grocery store, Dick Cheney is probably not going to sue for libel because we all probably know that he's not a robot. Nobody really believes that, so it's probably not going to be something that he would sue for. With defamation, you need to have a statement that somebody has made, and it needs to not be true. So it has to be a false statement, and they have to have spoken it or printed it or recorded it in some way. It also has to be a statement of fact, cannot be a subjective opinion. So if somebody is just giving their opinion, that is not defamation. And that is one of the ways that Trump has recently been found not liable for some of the things that are in his tweets. He has been sued on some of them, and the courts have found they are opinion. He is allowed to say what he believes about you in an opinion sort of way. So opinions are not defamation. Now you might be wondering about when people put up reviews on a lot of these sites like TripAdvisor or Priceline or whatever. Sometimes people put very negative reviews up there. And the question is, are these sites, like is TripAdvisor responsible for the opinions that people have put or the statements that people have made on their sites? They could be statements of fact, not just opinions. So are we going to hold TripAdvisor liable for that, or just the person who put that statement up there? And what has happened is Congress has enacted this Communications Decency Act, which protects internet service providers. They are immune for material that is created by other people. So when other people have put something up there, we're not going to hold these ISPs liable for that. They're allowed to just be a third party. Be very similar to a library having a book that happens to contain defamation, the library doesn't maybe know that, so we're not holding the library liable for owning that book. So it's a similar situation to that. Now we have several defenses to defamation, and the first one is obvious. It is that the statement is actually true. That is probably the most common defense that we see people state, and that is, this was actually a true statement. You cannot just believe that it is true, it must actually be true. So if something is true, that would be a defense. But our second big area of defense is privilege. And we have two kinds of privilege. We have absolute privilege and conditional privilege. And absolute privilege only occurs in two situations. We have an absolute privilege for senators and congressmen who are speaking on the floor of Congress. So when they are on the floor, whatever they say, that is protected from defamation. It's an absolute privilege. Nobody can sue them for what they say on the floor of Congress. The other time there is an absolute privilege is when you are testifying in court. If you have been called into court as a witness, you obviously are going to take an oath to tell the truth, and if you violate the oath, you could go to jail for perjury. So we're assuming that people will tell the truth on the stand. But if you did not, you could not be sued for defamation. So that is another place where you are completely protected from that. We also have conditional privilege, and conditional privilege really covers two main situations that you need to think about. The first one is for public figures have a conditional privilege. We have a conditional privilege when you are talking about public figures, and you also have a conditional privilege when you are giving job recommendations. And with the conditional privilege, we don't hold you to the high standard of it actually has to be true statement. What we say is that you have to either know that the statement is false or have a reckless disregard for the truth. In other words, you don't even try in any way whatsoever to figure out if it's true or not. You just say it. So if you are doing a job recommendation, as long as you use a reasonable amount of care, if it happens that you say something that is false, you probably can't be sued for defamation because you have this conditional privilege. The same would be true if you say something about a public figure. So in situations like this, I don't know if Katie Holmes actually has drugs or not, but if the Star magazine did not know that it was false and reasonably tried to determine if it was true, they can't be sued for defamation. Here's another example. I found this one unbelievable because we see Michelle Obama all the time, so I think we'd all know if she gained 95 pounds. But they put this up there, so maybe that is a reckless disregard for the truth if it's very obvious that she has not gained all this weight. Okay, we also have some privacy torts. So we have 4 privacy torts, and this is an example of our first one. You don't really need to read the article. But I just want you to look at the headline. The headline says the school buys new security software to thwart would-be hackers. And then we see a young woman there, and she even has a baseball cap on. She kind of looks like a hacker. So it might feel like they are saying that she's a computer hacker. And that would be something that we call a false light. It usually happens with headlines and captions, and it's where the newspaper or the magazine or whatever it is creates an impression that's not really valid. Now in this situation, they're probably going to be okay because they have the caption under her picture that gives her name and just says she's using the school computer for classwork. So they're sort of clarifying that under their caption. But if they had not had that, she might have a case for false light in that situation. Our second privacy tort is the public disclosure of private facts. And the public disclosure of private facts is going to be where people publicize something about you that is highly offensive, and you have not waived your right to privacy. And one of the areas where this has turned out to be a little bit of a problem is with some of these genealogy organizations, the ones that publish, they can look into your ancestry. Well, some people have discovered that some of their ancestors maybe did some things they didn't want to know about, or maybe there's some problems in the past, and then this becomes disclosed to lots of people. And so some people have been suing some of these genealogy companies for this public disclosure of private facts.